This world, there's one man who refuses to follow the script.
We have rules here, you know that. And if you don't follow the rules, then what are we?
One man stands tall in the face of adversity.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
A man who rises above the ashes of hot takes.
What do you care what they say?
Easy for you to say they all love you.
It's just noise, man. You're really good at it. You might be great.
That man is Nick Kostos, and this is You Better You Bet.
If loving sports is wrong, I don't want to be right.
Where narratives are challenged and the truth is spoken.
I told you what was going to happen last week. If you didn't listen, that's on you.
This isn't talk, it's perspective.
It's not what you look at that matters. It's what you see.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
And it is a great day to be alive on Westwood One Sports, especially if you're in the Canyon of Heroes. Oh, is it a day in New York already? 9 a.m. Eastern, and already they've had a full day in New York. The parade hasn't even started for the Knicks. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today and tomorrow here on Westwood One Sports. It is You Better You Bet, and yes, the Knicks championship parade is today. Get started 1 hour from now. We will check in on that parade and all the nonsense that may ensue later in the show. I imagine there will be plenty. The owner wasn't talking about the parade, but was talking about the offseason already yesterday. Something James Dolan said is worth kicking around. We've got the World Cup continuing, and now we're on to the second game of group play. 1 week down, second week starts in earnest today. Tomorrow, the U.S. taking on Australia with a chance to lock up a bid in the round of 32. I don't know if mathematically it locks them in, but basically it locks them in. A second victory over Australia would do that. We've got PR battles. Oh, yeah, somebody is taking that tarnish and polishing it up real nice-like with their chance to go pro. We'll talk about Brendan Sorsby and what his agent had to say yesterday. I mentioned the NBA offseason. We all know the first domino to fall will be the Giannis Antetokounmpo trade. But something else happened yesterday that could have a real ripple effect on the top of the draft. And we'll go back to something one of our guests said on Tuesday that also affects the drama that might be incoming at the top of the NBA draft, which is now just 5 days away. So much to get to. One guy has got big expectations. And I don't know, I hate to question whether these are legit expectations this guy has for his team after the comparison he made yesterday, because I wonder if he's trying to already build the architecture of a case to ask out if things don't go well this year. Yeah, we'll talk Joe Burrow in just a little bit as well. Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports is going to join us for a more detailed look at Brendan Sorsby and what teams should be considering giving up for him in this supplemental draft coming up. Great parade and championship celebratory moments on the way before 10 a.m. as well, because there are a few that stick in my mind. I think it's very different for everybody depending on where you live and who you're the biggest fan of and what celebrations you've had a chance to attend. But we all have a memory or two that, regardless of who we're a fan of, sticks in our head. And we'll get to some of those before 10 o'clock. In the final hour, the power hour here today on You Better You Bet. How about this? U.S. men's national team great Eric Wynalda is going to join us. Of course, he hosts WTF, Wynalda Talks Football, on Sirius XM every week. We'll talk to him about whether Team USA should tap the brakes on Christian Pulisic tomorrow against Australia, let that calf heal up, and see if they can get that second dub without him, or if they need to make sure he's in the lineup, and what he thinks of, like I said, the first week of the World Cup down and the second set of group play games beginning today, including what should be a really good match tonight, especially if you're an international soccer fan, especially if you live in Southern California, where I know El Tri, I said that as white as possible. El Tri? It's not a place where you roll your R. El Tri. Mexico taking on South Korea tonight. We got to look at that one later in the show as well. A lot to get to. The U.S. Open was supposed to start today. I don't know if they've actually gotten underway yet, if the fog has burned off on Long Island. Where, by the way, how would you like to be trying to take the Long Island Railroad today? Whether you're headed east out to Shinnecock or west towards Manhattan for the parade, it's got to be just utter chaos trying to get around the New York metro area today. A lot to get to, whether it's the NBA offseason, the Knicks parade, OTAs and mini camps wrapping up around the NFL, the World Cup, Sorsby, all of it. Let's get into the 5 biggest stories of the day right off the top. We call it the High Five.
5.
If anybody should be questioned or be catching heat, it should be Cincinnati, because they knew for 2 years and never said anything and didn't do anything about it.
Oh, okay. It's all Cincinnati's fault. That's Brendan Sorsby's agent, Ron Slavin. Yesterday, he was on, it was just about 24 hours ago, with Sean and RJ on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. Shout-outs to my boy RJ Choppy. They had Ron Slavin on for a good 15, 20 minutes and talked to him about a number of different things, not the least of which was, what people are going to think of Sorsby given these transgressions. And Slavin pushed back, as he and Sorsby's people will continue to do, probably not just up until the supplemental draft, but beyond the supplemental draft, on this narrative that Sorsby was a degenerate hiding in back alleys and smoky rooms to make bets on games that he was actively playing. Slavin pushed back on that. He said no. The games he bet on were when he wasn't even on the active travel roster at Indiana. He was literally sitting back home on campus on these weekends and made the same terrible mistakes that a lot of 18-year-olds make. And that's a hell of a point by Slavin. Like, 18-year-old kids make terrible mistakes. I talked about being 22 the other day when we were talking about Wemby and his maturity issues. When you're that age, I couldn't even imagine. If you just did a laundry list of all the stupid stuff I did when I was between the ages of 18 and 22, we could spend the rest of the show just talking about how dumb each of those decisions were. So the polishing of Brendan Sorsby's public image has begun. Yeah, we're getting in there with one of those rags and some of that polish your grandma used to use on like the Christmas silverware, and we're just getting right down in there, and we're going to polish this out. We're going to buff it right out. You're going to continue to get this. Like I said, up to and through the NFL supplemental draft, as Slavin, Sorsby's agent, and Brendan Sorsby's team try to convince not just the public, but more importantly, NFL GMs, that this was just a dumb mistake by a kid, and that given his athletic abilities and his talent, he is worth going with as high a pick as possible in this supplemental draft. I don't blame them for trying to polish his image. I don't blame Slavin for going on the air with Sean and RJ in Dallas yesterday and doing everything he can to try and reclaim the reputation of his client. They're going to have to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to get that over the coming weeks until this supplemental draft actually happens, and then beyond. The question is not whether you or I or anybody else in the general public or sports viewing universe is willing to buy it. The question is, are GMs willing to buy it? And if they are, is it enough for them to say, okay, this isn't worth, hey, let's maybe bid a fourth rounder and we'll see what happens, to make GMs go, no, man, this is the NFL. It's a league where until you have your quarterback, you don't have anything else. And we need that quarterback. Screw it. First round pick. Let's do it. I mentioned the other day, it would be very Jetsy, but the Jets have 3 first round picks. I could see them doing it. There are a couple other teams. We could see maybe spending a higher draft pick on Sorsby, trying to spend a higher draft pick on Sorsby in this supplemental draft than maybe we originally thought because of the baggage. What makes sense and what can we actually expect from Brendan Sorsby when he steps on an NFL field? We'll talk to an expert, a guy who watches prospects and the NFL draft year-round. Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports will join us to dive into it in exactly 15 minutes here on Westwood One Sports. Next.
4.
I just wanted to leave a certain way. I didn't want to leave and make it public and make it seem like I hated Atlanta, because I never will hate Atlanta. Atlanta will forever be my second home. And so I just wanted to leave the right way.
Trae Young last week on the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark, Fred Taylor, and Channing Crowder, talking about his departure from Atlanta to Washington and how he actually wanted to go to Washington. And apparently he's still interested, if you believe the reports, in staying in Washington. But that didn't keep him from opting out of the final year of this deal with the Wizards and attempting to hit free agency next week. Yeah, Kenny's got a good point in our chat. He sounds like a dude breaking up with a girl. I just didn't want to make it public. I wanted it to end the right way. I wanted us to be friends. I don't know if in Washington it's going to end that way, because Washington's entire thought, the Wizards, I would think, was, okay, we got Trae Young, we got AD for what that's worth. Now, if we can go out and land the first overall pick in the draft, maybe we can get AJ DeBonsa as well. How's that sound? AD, DeBonsa, and Trae Young. That's a good start. It's a hell of a start. And I think that was the plan until Trae Young decided to opt out of this deal. Now, it's entirely possible, if not likely, that Young ends up back in Washington anyway, and this is just a maneuver to get more of a long-term deal out of Washington, more money, whatever it may be. But the Wizards, if they go into Tuesday night's draft not having figured out the Trae Young part of the equation, are going to have to consider going with someone other than DeBonsa. And look, maybe these are the shady backroom conversations that led Darren Peterson to believe that he's going first overall. Maybe the chatter behind the scenes the whole time was, listen, Trae Young's going to opt out of Washington and hit free agency. The Wizards don't know if he's going to be back or not, and they, instead of DeBonsa, are going to go with Darren Peterson. Maybe that's why Peterson decided to not interview or work out with anybody other than Washington. Maybe he knows exactly what's going to happen, and we're all fools. I want to get into how all of this plays out, the ripple effect of the Trae Young opt-out, and what it means for Dabonsa, Peterson, the Wizards, the Jazz, Boozer, the Grizzlies, Caleb Wilson, the Bulls. The entire top 4 of the draft, I think, are still spinning plates, or maybe more like balls being juggled up in the air. And we had somebody on Tuesday, Brian Geltzeiler of SiriusXM NBA Radio, lay it out in a very interesting way. We'll let you hear that right at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock and talk about the ripple effect of Trae Young opting out in Washington. That's coming up. The 5 biggest stories of the day to start the show, though. The high 5 here on You Better You Bet. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos. Number 3.
I want everybody talking about the Bengals. I want everybody talking about what I'm saying in my press conferences. I mean, you go back and watch what I said before 2019 season at LSU. I feel very similarly about this team.
That's a hell of a comparison made by Joe Burrow yesterday. Talking about this year's Bengals team. And Zach Taylor thought they did a hell of a job at minicamp. So good after all the installations were done. He gave him the final 2 days off. Said early dismissal from minicamp. Joe Burrow, for what it's worth, said, man, I like the feeling we have right now. I wish we could roll this right into training camp. He is building this team up. And I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not saying it's not with genuine belief behind it. Because I'll be honest, I've bought into the idea of the Bengals not just bouncing back and entering the playoffs, but maybe doing more than that. Because I believe in Joe Burrow. And I believe while it wasn't an overhaul of the defense, they did enough that this defense will not be one of the worst, if the worst, in the league this year. And that gives Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense a fighting chance. All that being said, if they don't make the playoffs, it's not going to just be Zach Taylor's head rolling. That's the immediate impact of the Bengals missing the playoffs for a 4th straight season. I have to wonder if it doesn't lead Joe Burrow to question his long-term future in Cincinnati. And if it does, then laying the groundwork now for, hey, I thought we had a great team. I just don't know if we're ever going to get it done here. Maybe I should consider moving on somewhere else. Burrow's already alluded in some ways to being unhappy over the past year. Maybe we're just laying another piece of the foundation for Burrow looking to move on from Cincinnati after this year. It's possible both could be true, that's part of it, but Burrow also really believes in this team. That's a possibility. Both can be true. It's not mutually exclusive here, but I want to talk about the Bengals and several other teams that everybody is just assuming are going to be back in the playoffs this year. That coming up around 10:20 Eastern here on Westwood One Sports. Next.
2.
Hey, New York! I'm sorry it took so long, but here we are, and hopefully it won't take that long again.
James Dolan at the trophy presentation Saturday night in San Antonio. It'd be a whole lot easier to get back there again sooner, Jim, if you're willing to do some of the uncomfortable things financially and with the cap that championship teams sometimes have to do. Look, it's harder than ever to repeat in the NBA, as evidenced by the fact that we've had 8 straight years of non-repeating champions. As evidenced by the fact that the second apron is the most punitive thing laid out in a CBA, really, since collective bargaining began in the NBA. It is a real kick to the junk if you go over that second apron, and the Knicks are really close to it going into this offseason. And you can probably, if you're a Knicks fan, get over the idea of, okay, Landry Shamet isn't going to be back. Okay, Jose Alvarado isn't going to be back. We can survive. Those are in the starting 5. Mitchell Robinson is the one that everybody keeps talking about, though. Mitchell Robinson was key, especially defensively, in helping Karl Anthony Towns, especially against Victor Wembanyama in the finals. So I understand maybe if James Dolan's thought is, all right, well, If we want another big man to play defense and clank free throws off the front of the rim, we can go find one without going over the second apron. But I also question if it's not the time. Okay, your starting five is going to remain intact. Maybe this is just vibes because everybody's flying high. It's Knicks Parade Day in New York. But I think you have to consider, as long as you're not doing it for multiple years, going over that second apron for just a year to try and keep it together. We'll see which way the Knicks decide to go. I think that's another question that we ask when we look ahead to the NBA offseason, and we will do that, including the first big Greek domino that needs to fall in this NBA offseason. That coming up around 10:40 Eastern here on You Better You Bet. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos. Your 5 biggest stories of the day to start the show, as we do every time with the High Five. And number 1.
Well, a similar update to provide in terms of Christian Pulisic and his calf injury. What I can say, he is participating in a modified training session today. You can actually see behind me, and I know the players are here now, but he is on the pitch. He does have a sleeve on that calf. Now, he's been working with the medical staff. This is the most we've seen him on the pitch in action this week. Now, he is day-to-day, but right now a good sign he's moving well, and we'll continue to keep you posted on Christian Pulisic and his calf injury.
That was Fox's update yesterday on Christian Pulisic. And yeah, it sounds like he's closer than ever to being full go for tomorrow, as that question has been asked over the last week. And I think, look, if you're Team USA, you'd obviously love to have Pulisic out on the pitch. I just called it a pitch instead of a field. That shows that I know something about soccer. Don't come at me, bro. You'd love to have Pulisic out there, obviously. But do you need him out there tomorrow afternoon? You had the most impressive win of the first week of the World Cup, in my opinion. You could maybe argue that England's win yesterday was close to that impressive. But when you stack it up with the opponent and how they won, Team USA's win last weekend was the most impressive win from the first week of the World Cup, in my opinion. That's not just me being a patriotic homer. And another win basically locks up a trip to the round of 32. So do you need to push Pulisic tomorrow afternoon against Australia? Or do you say, you know what? We're going to hold off. We're going to give it more time to calm down. We're going to make sure he's ready for the final game of group play against Turkey. And if the worst that happens is we draw Australia, and then we've got to get another point against Turkey to ensure that we're through to the round of 32, then so be it. I think given this American team's depth that we've heard so much about in the run-up to and the start of the World Cup, you have to be willing, if Pulisic isn't 100%, to not push him tomorrow afternoon against Australia. We will ask a guy who has been in this situation before, who has represented our country in the World Cup. Former U.S. men's national team great Eric Winalda is going to join us in the third and final hour, the power hour here on You Better You Bet. He'll join us right around 11:20 Eastern, 8:20 Pacific to talk about that. Does Pulisic have to play tomorrow against Australia, or is discretion the better part of valor in group play, especially after the way Team USA played last weekend in their big win over Paraguay? Coming up, though, the questions about Brendan Sorsby are plenty, and people seem to differ greatly on what kind of pick he's worth in this NFL supplemental draft. So we'll ask someone who's locked in on the draft year-round. Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports joins us next right here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
The Damage Control Tour has started for Ron Slavin, the agent of Brendan Sorsby, in what will now be a little less than a month-long run-up to the NFL's supplemental draft. We'll talk to a guy who pays attention to prospects in the draft year-round in just a moment. Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports is going to join us here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet. Coming up top of the hour, we could have some NBA draft drama incoming, and it's based on a guy opting out of a deal when I think that team probably expected him to stick around, and it could change their strategy for the Washington Wizards with the first overall pick, Trae Young deciding to opt out. Plus, you've got Darren Peterson perhaps trying to angle his way in one direction or another. That's all coming up at the top of the hour. Plus, later in the show, Eric Winalda to talk World Cup and Christian Pulisic, whether they need to push him to be back Team USA against Australia tomorrow afternoon. But we've got, like I said, a little less than a month to lead up to the NFL supplemental draft. Has to happen on or before July 16th because it has to occur at least a week before the first training camps open. That's according to league rules. And they will have a dedicated window between July 5th and 12th where anybody who wants to be in the NFL supplemental draft can hold a pro day or a workout for an NFL team. We know one guy right now who's going to be in the NFL supplemental draft. It's Brendan Sorsby, and one guy I want to talk to about that, Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports, the co-host of With the First Pick. Get it wherever you get your podcast. Morning, Ryan. How are you?
Hey, Chris, always good to talk to you. Usually don't talk to you in June, not because I don't like you, but because the draft is well in the rear view. But here we are. We have one last straggler from the 2026 NFL draft class to discuss.
Yeah, and I guess my first question for this whole thing, we talked out the other day here on the show how the process works and the blind bids and all that. My first question to you is, how much does the weight of what Sorsby did offset what talents he may have in the eyes of general managers, especially NFL general managers who are seemingly always thirsty for their next starting quarterback?
I'm just going to say this, and I haven't heard the question posed that way, but it got my the old hamster wheel turning. Had Sorsby entered the 2026 NFL draft with the rest of the class, Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson, Carson Beck, etc., I'm willing to wager. And again, we live in we work in an arena, Chris, where everything we say is couched in gambling terms. So this is, when I say I'm willing to wager, it's just one of those things that it's almost road at this point. But I'm willing to make a guesstimate that he would have gone number 2 overall to the New York Jets, assuming everything off the field had been clean. Knowing what we know, and there could be more coming out. I don't know how much worse it could get, but it's pretty bad right now. Gambling on your own team, gambling in general in the sports you play is obviously very taboo. I would be surprised if a team wagers more than a 4th round pick or submits more than a 4th round pick because it's done via email, given all that we know, because it's first round talent. It's undrafted free agent off field with the gambling, not the allegations, but the gambling certainties that we know about.
So that's a 3-round dip in value based on the off-field transgressions that we're talking about. How much do you think? I mentioned Ron Slavin, Sorsby's agent, going on the Fan in Dallas yesterday to sort of start the PR tour to polish up Sorsby's image, to try and clear up some questions that people may have about when the gambling took place, how it took place, what went down. And I do have to grant him this, like the one thing that he said that made sense to me as someone who did a lot of stupid stuff in their late teens and early 20s. This is a guy who was sitting at home, not a part of the travel roster for Indiana at the time, making a very stupid mistake. Do you think once I know most teams have already looked at the tape or broken down what they've seen and have evaluated the talent. Do you think when they sit with that, and again, balance it against the counterweight of what he's able to do you think teams, as they sit there and wait for this, is the waiting process going to, and the continued PR tour, going to continue to push GMs away from, this kid's an idiot, he can't be the future quarterback on this team, to, a lot of guys on this roster have made mistakes and we still trust them.
I'm laughing because that's exactly why PR exists, right? And the longer you can tell someone something, whether it's true or not, and this isn't specific to Brendan Sorsby, just the world we live in, you start to believe it. I mean, that is a tale as old as time. So absolutely, there's a reason that Ron Slavin is saying what he's saying. In part, he probably believes some of it, but also to reinforce again and again and again to NFL teams and teams that are interested in Brendan Sorsby or perhaps don't yet know they should be interested in Brendan Sorsby, why they should be. Yeah, and look, man, you make a great point. And I've tried to, when talking about Sorsby, not be judgmental because forget teens and 20s. You can go 30s and 40s, and I've done plenty of stupid stuff. And, I'm not going to be the one to cast a stone while living in the glass house. People do go through a lot of stuff and a lot of things happen. But, as my grandmother once told me, you have freedom of choice. You don't have freedom of consequence. And that's sort of what we're trying to weigh right now.
Ryan Wilson, a CBS Sports co-host of With the First Pick, alongside Rand Carthon. Get it wherever you get your podcast. Joins us to talk about Brendan Sorsby. All right, let's talk about the actual football talent and what he can actually do on the field, because much of the scouting reporting that I've seen on Sorsby is, hey, very good, excellent arm talent, maybe not elite, but excellent arm talent. But sometimes it also leads him to believe in his arm a little too much and try to write checks that perhaps he can't cash and make poor decisions. It reminds me a lot, to be honest, and I don't say this just as a Steelers fan, but it reminds me a lot of some of the stuff we saw from Ben Roethlisberger early in his career. I know we're going way back 20 years now, but hey, I'm athletic. I can make things happen when I'm on the move, and because of my arm strength, I'm going to make some dumb decisions at times.
Yeah, and he actually plays, I remember those Big Ben days quite well. He plays more instruction than Ben did coming out of Miami, but also played at a program that was playing a little tougher schedule. Now, you can argue, and Bruce Feldman talked about this in The Athletic, he wrote about a couple weeks ago, Sorsby's 1-11 in November games the last 2 or 3 years, I think. Not entirely his fault, and when you watch those games from those November outings, it wasn't like he completely and wholly tanked. He had drops he dealt with. The offensive line struggled at times. They were playing better competition. But in terms of who he is, you sort of touched it. He's 6'3", 230. He is fantastic in space with his legs, but he's not a quarterback, sort of like Big Ben did early on in his Steelers career, looking to run if the first read isn't there. He throws a fantastic deep ball, and he's incredibly efficient throwing the deep ball. That is something that sticks out because a lot of times guys can chuck it, but they struggle with the accuracy. He's not elite when it comes through getting through his reads on time, but his ability to create out of structure is what compensates for that. And, Big Ben's a great comp. One that I kept thinking about was, sort of if Josh Allen had a little brother, because he's not 6'5", 240. He is 6'3", 230, and he can absolutely run and has a big arm. And I do think he's 22, 23 years old, so he's played some ball, unlike Ty Simpson, who was 23 and only played 15 games. He would have been QB2 in last year's draft class from 2 months ago. And I think he actually, on the field, has a chance to get a lot better. Again, sort of the ghost of Josh Allen's younger brother, if you will. And that, more than anything, and we know this, Chris, that will determine how much owners will buy into the idea of giving up draft capital for Brendan Sorsby when this happens.
So that being said, I mean, obviously, I don't know if anybody would look at him as a day one starter, but he makes the most sense in a place where there's at least a placeholder for the time being. So naturally, people look to the Jets, who you mentioned obviously had the second overall pick and may have been enticed to take Sorsby in April's draft. People look at places like, I think we brought up Atlanta on Tuesday's show when we talked about this, because you have giant question marks over both guys there, and Penix and Tua. I brought up Tampa the other day because you don't know what's going to happen with Baker and whether he's going to get an extension there. Somebody brought up the idea the other day, though, that I thought was really interesting. One of our producers, Tyler, mentioned the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff's not getting any younger. They don't really have a legit up-and-coming young backup quarterback, a place where he could slide right in as a backup, learn on the fly, and maybe you could make the argument the culture somewhat transforms him as well and gets him farther away from those mistakes, both on and off the field.
Yeah, Detroit's an interesting one. Based on my experience with Detroit, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell don't play any off-field concerns at all. And that, to me, would potentially be disqualifying given sourcing. But I understand the rationale, and it makes sense. I would be surprised if it were Detroit. But again, we're in a league where surprising things happen. I just know that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell take the locker room dynamic very seriously. But some of those other teams also would conceivably make sense. I do wonder if the Jets, who are also trying to sort of reinvent themselves in terms of character and locker room, would go down that path, those 3 first-round picks. I don't think the Browns would do it. They just drafted Taylor Green in the 4th round. That doesn't necessarily require that they can't draft a Sorsby, but they do have 2 first-rounders and maybe looking towards the Arch Manning sweepstakes. A couple of other teams, I was talking to some sources about this. The first name that came up was Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys. And it's sort of the Detroit Lions situation. You don't have much behind your superstar, and the infrastructure is actually in place in Dallas. They have a history of taking on projects, if you want to call them that. We famously, Pac-Man Jones had someone to keep an eye on him when he was in Dallas, and we know that Jerry Jones is not afraid to go where others maybe fear if it means a big payoff. And again, I think your other point's an important one, Chris. Sorsby's not going to play next year unless something dire happens should he get drafted. This is a down the road 27, 28 situation where you're planning for your future, your current quarterback to no longer be with the team. I've also heard Seattle could be a landing spot for the sort of the same reasons. No pressure. You're behind Darnold. You're in a great situation where winning is what's expected, and anything else will probably end up with you losing your job, being on the street, whatever.
Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports with us, talking about Brendan Sorsby, what he looks like on the field and how it'll translate to Sundays in the NFL with that supplemental draft looming in just a few weeks. Based on, let's just build out the spectrum from somebody spends a first-round pick on him all the way down to he goes undrafted and becomes a free agent. Where on that spectrum, what side do you think we're closer on first? To the wild, maybe overpay of a first-round pick, to not getting drafted by anyone at all?
I think right now, if I had to put down money, I would say 4th round. And you talked about this. We have a few weeks to 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks or so to figure this out until the actual supplemental draft takes place via email, sort of a blind auction. And here's what's going to happen. And Rand Carthon and I were talking about this yesterday on the podcast. Some teams have done work on Brendan Sorsby because they thought he was going to come out. So now you have to go back and do that work. More importantly, you have to get the sort of the off-field investigations taken care of. And most teams have a personal PI or whatever form that takes. Well, they'll continue to figure out what's going on there. And most importantly, you have to get the owner on board, because the owner is the one that's going to be paying Brendan Sorsby, and then it's going to have to answer the questions from owners, the media, whomever. And I think as we get further down that road, you talked about it a moment ago, and Slavin continues to push the PR narrative, there can be changes of opinion. And Ty Simpson wasn't the 13th overall pick until he was the 13th overall pick for a reason. Mm-hmm. And part of that, it feels like, had to do with more than just the on-field stuff. So I will say 4th round right now. I don't think it gets higher than a 3rd round if teams are convinced that they can work with Brendan Sorsby.
Before I let you run, Ryan, just based on, and look, we had conversations a year ago about the 2026 NFL quarterback class and how good it was going to be. So this could all go out the window by mid-November. But based on what we know now, is the strength of the 2027 quarterback class what you think hampers Sorsby going earlier in this supplemental draft than maybe he would? If this had happened a year ago, maybe Sorsby fetches a 2nd or 3rd round pick in the supplemental draft. Being that we're going into the 2027 quarterback process, is that what keeps this down to, say, a 4th round pick, in your opinion?
No, that's a good question. I still think it's more to do with the off-field, and this is why. So we just started looking at the quarterback class on the podcast yesterday. Summer scouting is what we call it, and we're 15 guys deep. Here's the thing. Had Sorsby stayed in this class and everything had been clean off the field, I had him as QB3 right now behind Dante Moore and Arch Manning, whichever order you want to choose them. Rand Carthon had him number 4. The only other quarterback he had ahead of him is Julian Sayin. Julian Sayin's a redshirt sophomore. CJ Carr is going to be a redshirt sophomore. There's Jaden Mayava, who's a senior. After those first 2, Dante and Arch, it gets pretty wide open. So I think the issue is strictly more off field, unless you have the first or second pick and you feel comfortable with those two guys. After that, it's going to be a crapshoot. Like, there is no certainty in terms of what we're going to have in the quarterbacks. And don't forget, Carson Beck was at one point the number 1 overall pick a couple of years ago. Ty Simpson was not even in the conversation last summer as a first-round pick. So a lot can change. I think if Sorsby had not had the outfield issues and he were in the supplemental draft just because of eligibility issues, there would be first-round conversations about it.
Ryan, great stuff, man. I love catching up with you, even in the month of June, when normally you would avoid me. I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for the time.
Always good to see you, Chris.
Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports. Check out With the First Pick. He and Rand Carthon, as you heard him mention there, talking draft 24/7, 365. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how over the next 3.5 weeks, as this plays out, teams, as Ryan pointed out, are going to do their own research on Sorsby. In some cases, these teams have better detective teams than the actual police departments of cities that they're located in. I'm only half joking about that. Like, the detective work that NFL teams can do is deep. It's like Mariska Hargitay SVU level stuff. So I am curious to see how that continues to get polished over the next 3.5 weeks. And if all it takes literally is one team to say, all right, we're bidding a second round pick, or one team to go nuts and say, no, you know what? We're buying everything they're selling. This guy's talented. We need a quarterback in the next couple of years. Let's go with a first rounder. It takes one team to do that. And I'll be curious to see which teams start to become infatuated with the idea of the rehabilitation of Sorsby's reputation. We'll get back into this a little bit later in the show, but coming up next, it's going down in New York today, about 15 minutes away from the start of the Knicks championship parade in Manhattan. Will there be a moment that goes on the list with some of the best celebratory championship parade moments of all time? We'll find out over the next few hours, but a couple from the past that I want to remind you of that are some of my absolute favorites. Coming up next here on Westwood One Sports.
rock right now. I'm Shaq D's and I came to get down. Yes, I'm internationally known, and I'm known to rock a microphone, because I get stupid. Me and Kobe, stay away from me. You know you can't hold me.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Legendary Shaq Fu rapping during the 2001 Lakers championship celebration and parade. While in the background the whole time, you had Mark Madsen doing the worst drunk white guy at a wedding dance. And wearing like a pair of not Dockers, like Jordache jeans from like 1986. It was absolutely amazing. Do we get a moment like that today? This segment sponsored by Progressive Commercial Insurance, protecting small businesses with affordable coverage options. Get a quote today at progressivecommercial.com. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports. It's New York. Like, the stuff I've seen already about people lining up overnight along Broadway to be there for this parade. The clip that we got of the Jalen Brunson lookalike contest. There was one guy in there. Unc was trying so hard. Had like a black piece of construction paper taped around his arm to look like an arm sleeve. Was barely, the gut was barely held back by the Knicks jersey that he was wearing. That's the kind of fun stuff that happens. I'm curious to see what we get from the players themselves during the, do we get a Tom Brady chucking the Lombardi from one boat to another kind of moment? Do we get, a Jason Kelsey profanity-laced tirade while in a crazy costume, like at the Eagles parades several years ago now? God, almost 10 years ago, when he was dressed up like a mummer. Do we get something like one of my favorite memories, one of my favorite all-time parade memories, because I've been to a couple of Steelers championship parades and at least one Penguins championship parade. One of my favorite memories is Troy Polamalu standing on top of a truck or a car as it came down the Boulevard of the Allies in Pittsburgh. And the crowd, 10, 12 people deep on each side going nuts. And Troy Polamalu just said the hell with it and leapt off the truck into the crowd and just started crowd surfing. That's some of the fun stuff that you get at these championship parades that I imagine we may or may not have some moments of today. We will check in on the coverage of that parade a little bit later in the show. It officially gets started, like I said, in a little more than 5 minutes. Also, NBA offseason, a lot going on. We will touch on that. Of course, a no-sweat goal scorer token available for you. A qualifying anytime goal scorer, first goal scorer, or last goal scorer during the World's game gets you bonus bets if you don't win. Give sweating your bets the boot with BetMGM. Download the BetMGM app today, and please gamble responsibly. We'll talk to Eric Winalda later in the show about the U.S.-Australia match tomorrow. But coming up next, NBA draft drama incoming after a move that went down yesterday. That's next here on Westwood One Sports.
Darren Peterson either wants to be the number 1 overall pick or he wants to go to the Bulls. That's what this is about. He doesn't want to go to the Jazz. He doesn't want to go to Memphis. He wants to go somewhere where he's in a larger market and can be marketed or be the number 1 pick. And even in Washington, it's a good market. These are the types of markets Darren Peterson wants to go to.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
That was literally 48 hours ago. Brian Geltzeiler of SiriusXM NBA Radio right here on Westwood One Sports on You Better You Bet. Chris Mack filling in again for Nick Kostos today and tomorrow. And Geltz had a bunch of interesting items to share when we talked NBA offseason with him, like I said, just 2 days ago. One of them was the idea of what a Giannis deal to Boston could look like and how it could send Jaylen Brown spinning off into a different orbit, not necessarily to Milwaukee. We'll get into that a little bit later. Before 11 a.m. Eastern, we will get into that. So right around 10:40, we'll touch on that because Giannis is still the first big Greek domino to fall in this NBA offseason. But I want to talk about what Brian Geltzeiler said there specifically about Darren Peterson, because I think the whole thing has had another, stone thrown into the pond, so to speak, and we're watching the ripples now echo out across the water. Because yesterday you had Trae Young opt out of the final year of his deal in Washington. And look, all the reporting is stating that Trae Young is still interested in staying in Washington, that he chose to go to Washington when the Hawks were looking to deal him this past spring because that's one of the places he wanted to be. But you opt out of a deal for a reason, and it's for multiple reasons, but the main reason is more money. Maybe not necessarily this year, but more money or more security, a longer-term deal. And so Trae Young is obviously looking for something that perhaps he and the Wizards weren't able to work out to this point. So he's going to test the market. And it's entirely possible that Trae Young comes back around to the Wizards. And if that happens before Tuesday night in the first round of the NBA draft, then maybe the Wizards' plan of Trae Young and Anthony Davis and adding AJ DeBonsa to the mix and all of it, maybe it stays in place and all the calculus still works and none of the variables change. And they feel like that's the soft launch of those three together. And maybe that's enough for Washington to say, okay, plan's still in place. It's AJ DeBonsa first overall. But you do have to wonder, when you see Darren Peterson say, nah, I'm not talking to or working out with anybody but the Wizards because I'm going to be the first overall pick. There are a couple different ways you can look at that. The first way is, dude's just confident in his abilities, believes he's the best player, and so that's what he's going to do. Maybe to the detriment of his own draft stock, but that's what he's going to do. He just believes he's so damn good, he's going to go first overall. The other lane you could take is this guy really wants to go to Chicago, as Geltz just said there a moment ago in that clip. He does not want to go to Utah at 2. He does not want to go to Memphis at 3. He wants to go to what he considers a big market where he can immediately become the face of a franchise and get the notoriety that he feels is due to him. And so that would be Washington or Chicago if we're looking at the top 4. And so, hey, let's position ourselves as only wanting to go number 1 so that Memphis at 2, or excuse me, Utah at 2 and Memphis at 3 pass on me and I end up in Chicago. The third lane is, and it could be a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B, but could be a whole lot from this lane, column C, which could be the behind-the-scenes chatter has told everybody involved exactly what's going to happen here. That Darren Peterson is going to go first overall because the Wizards do not believe Trae Young actually will be back in Washington. and they need the guard. And so Darren Peterson's going to go first. He knows it. The Wizards know it. Everybody knows it. And that's why he doesn't have to work out for anybody else and can so confidently say, I'm going to go first overall. It's not really all based on a maneuver to avoid Utah and Memphis. That's the ripple effect of Trae Young officially opting out of the final year of his deal in Washington yesterday. That all of this may actually be coming together in Darren Peterson's favor for him to go first overall to Washington. And if that happens, then again, the ripple effect continues to spread out across the pond. And Utah at 2 can't not take AJ DeBonsa. That's the pick. Or do they have to reconsider that because Cam Boozer is there? And who is Carlos Boozer working for now? Hold on. Is Carlos Boozer, does he work for the Jazz now? Maybe that affects things. I don't believe the Jazz could pass on DeBonsa if Peterson goes first. I think it's AJ DeBonsa 2. And then at 3, Memphis is left choosing between Boozer and Caleb Wilson. Or perhaps trading back rather than trading up as some people thought they would. If you're Utah and you're having an internal argument about DeBonsa or Boozer, do you pick up the phone when the Grizzlies inevitably call to try and move up to 2, offering you the 16th pick as well? And who knows what else? You may do that. You may get yourself the extra pick later in the first round. It's a deep draft. You can make that the argument to everybody that asks why you'd move back and not take DeBonsa if he's there at number 2. You move back a spot. You let Memphis make the decision. I presume they then take AJ DeBonsa. And if you're Utah moving back to 3, now it falls perfectly. Now Cam Boozer's still there. And we don't have to make the difficult decision between DeBonsa and Boozer. We let Memphis do that. And we got ourselves an extra pick in the middle of the first round to boot. I mean, we're only through the first 3 picks. And this is a very deep draft. The ripple effect Tuesday night, leading up to Tuesday night. It's going to be massive. And all of a sudden we get to 4 and a number of things have happened. Either DeBonsa has gone 1 and Utah and Memphis have both said, sorry, not willing to deal with Darren Peterson being unhappy here. We pass, and Peterson gets what he wants and falls to Chicago at 4. Or one of those two jumps on the Darren Peterson grenade, as it were. Look, the talent's worth it. I'm not trying to overdo it and making Darren Peterson seem like a bit of a headache. I'm not. But he could be. So it could be Peterson 1 to Washington. And then DeBonsa 2 to Utah, presumably. Maybe Memphis. Boozer 3, either to Utah or Memphis. And then Chicago, I don't want to say is left with Caleb Wilson, but Chicago gets Caleb Wilson. And I got to think Tiago Splitter would be more than happy with that as well. That's just the first 4 picks. The ripple effect is going to be real between now and Tuesday. And those are just the draft picks. The draft selections that we're talking about. That says nothing of all the other moves that may happen between now and then based off what the Milwaukee Bucks do with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Which is another fascinating piece to this that, you know what, forget it. Let's just get to it now. The other fascinating piece to this is if you're one of those teams with draft capital to move, and maybe you're sitting, I don't know, anywhere. You can be anywhere in the draft. And you look at yourself as a Jaylen Brown away from a run to a title, taking that next step. You're on the phone with Milwaukee right now. And Brad Stevens in Boston. Hey, what do we got to do to make this 3-team deal work? Because the other interesting part of what Brian Geltzeiler gave us the other day when he was on the show was that's how this works if it works between Milwaukee and Boston, is there's a third team in the mix. A team that you can spin Jaylen Brown off to if you're Milwaukee. And now you're getting just an absolute haul from two teams. Because you're dealing Antetokounmpo to Boston. Here you go. Here's a boatload of things. And you're also effectively dealing Jaylen Brown to Team 3. Here's a haul of things. Somebody, if that 3-team deal ends up going down between Milwaukee, Boston, and whoever, is going to get an absolute haul. And you would think it should be a team that's near the top of the draft, that's looking to rebuild. And I don't know, is that Brooklyn? Is that Atlanta, Dallas? There are a number of different spots there between 5 and 9 that I look at and go, ooh, okay, this is intriguing. How do they get involved in the possible Giannis, Jaylen Brown deal between Milwaukee and Boston? As Kenny just mentioned in the chat, Giannis to Boston, Jaylen Brown to Atlanta. Does Atlanta have the assets to make that worth everybody's while, at least Milwaukee's? I mean, they've got the 8th overall pick. If you're the Bucks in a draft like this one, how would you like to have the 8th overall pick and the 10th overall pick in the first round? And then if you get this done quickly enough, maybe you can flip 8 and 10 into something else, and you get up into Darius Acuff Jr. range. Then again, I don't know if there's that big a gulf between picks 5 and 9 or 5 and 10, depending on who you're putting there, talent-wise. But that is going to be the first massive domino to fall between now and Tuesday night. Giannis to Boston, if it goes that way. Jaylen Brown spun off in a different direction, which I still don't totally agree with for the Celtics. And it feels a little panicky. It does. And then all of these assets going to Team 3. Is it Brooklyn? Is it Atlanta? Is it Dallas? Again, just some of the teams that I'm throwing out there. That's your first big domino to fall. And then whether we're talking dominoes or ripples on the pond, everything will continue to spread out from there. A lot is going to happen in the first 9 to 10 picks of this draft on Tuesday night. Like right now, 2 teams in the top 10 are there because they own somebody else's pick. Like the Clippers own the Pacers pick at 5, and the Hawks own the Pelicans pick at 8. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about another 4 or 5 teams in the top 10 juggling spots between now and when the picks actually get made on Tuesday night. And that's just before the picks get made. Then who knows what else happens after the picks get made. We'll talk about what happens for the champs a little bit later, because the owner said something yesterday that makes sense on the surface. It really does. But I wonder if you have to strike while the iron is hot, while literally the parade is going on right now in New York. And we will actually see if we can check in on that parade at some point in the next hour or so here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos here on You Better You Bet. Coming up, one quarterback knows his team has to return to the playoffs this year. And the comparisons he's making say he expects a whole lot more than just a playoff appearance. We'll let you hear exactly what Joe Burrow said about this year's Bengals team next here on Westwood One Sports.
I want everybody talking about the Bengals. I want everybody talking about what I'm saying in my press conferences. Is he, you go back and watch what I said before 2019 season at LSU. I feel very similarly about this team.
That's bold.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Bold stuff from Joe Burrow yesterday as Bengals minicamp broke up in Cincinnati. That's a dude that one of two things. Well, both can be true. I think Joe Burrow believes in what they did in the offseason, especially the defensive side of the roster. But I also think Joe Burrow may have some ulterior motives to laying things out in that way. Get to that in a second here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos on You Better You Bet. Coming up 1 hour from now, U.S. men's national team great and the host of WTF, Winalda Talks Football on Sirius XM, Eric Winalda, will join us. We'll ask him, if he were running things, how far would he push Christian Pulisic to get back for tomorrow afternoon's match against Australia, given how deep this U.S. roster is and knowing how well they played in their opener against Paraguay? Do you need to push? Or do you look at it and say, you know what? Let's make sure our stud is healthy and ready to go for the knockout stage. We should be able to get there even without him. We'll talk to Eric Winalda 1 hour from now. This segment sponsored by Progressive Commercial Insurance, protecting your business vehicles 24/7. See if you could save at progressivecommercial.com. So Joe Burrow says that about the Bengals. Compares it to the feeling he had going into the 2019 season when he was the quarterback at LSU and they went on to win the national championship. And I think, both things, as I said earlier, can be true. He can really believe in what they've done with this team this offseason, really believe in himself and his skill position players on that side of the ball. That can all be true. But I also think there's been the very beginnings of a framework and a foundation built by Burrow over the last year or so of, okay, this doesn't work out. Maybe I'm not staying in Cincinnati. We got comments last year about his frustration. And these comments in talking up this year's team would lead me to believe that if it were to go wrong in Cincinnati again this year, and they are right near the top of the list in teams I expect to go to the playoffs this year who missed last year. I'll give you my ranking of like the top 5 in just a second. Or I guess there are 5 teams that are talked about more than others about returning to the playoffs and how they're expected to do so. We'll get to that in a second. I want to keep it on Burrow for just a moment here. In building that framework of, we've got a great team. I mean, so good, it reminds me of my national championship year at LSU. In building that framework around the Bengals 2026 season, Joe Burrow is accomplishing one very big thing, and that is, look, I think he's a bright enough guy that he knows that he's doing this. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's just all genuine belief in his team. But it wouldn't be the first time somebody did this. He is building the framework around if they were to miss the playoffs again. Zach Taylor ain't going to be the only one to go. Maybe Joe Burrow is looking for a way out of Cincinnati if that happens. Maybe it's a power play. Maybe it's a way to say, hey, we've got all this talent. I believe we're going to be great. If we're not, it's that guy, pointing at Zach Taylor. Maybe it's more innocuously and somewhat more innocently or less nefariously. That's it. Hey, I'm just going to build the framework around this now. We should be a really good team. Subtext, if it doesn't work out, yes, the coach needs to go. But I would think there's some more subtext in there, which is man, this organization's tried to do everything they can at this point. And maybe they just can't put a good enough team around me. Maybe I need to go somewhere else where the organization really knows how to put a team together and I've got a better chance to win. Maybe that's me reading way too much into it. Maybe that's making something where there is nothing, adding 2 and 2 and getting 5. Maybe it's as simple as Joe Burrow just really believes in his teammates. But I think it could be a little bit of both. They are not at the top of my list, though, of teams that I expect to return to the playoffs this year after missing last year. The number one team, in my opinion, that we should expect back in the playoffs this year after not making it last year is the Detroit Lions. And look, as much as we've talked up the NFC North, and I have, I mean, we talked about it with Courtney Cronin, I believe it was last week when I was filling in for Nick one day. The NFC North is stacked, probably the deepest, best division in football. And it's going to be hard to win that division. But the Lions are a playoff team. The Lions are a playoff team, especially when you look at their schedule. And I hate to make it all about schedules, but if we're going to sit here and talk about how the Patriots are going to regress because they don't have a last place cupcake schedule this year, then we need to also acknowledge that schedules matter in so much as the Detroit Lions have one of the softest schedules in the NFL this year. Let me rapid fire run this down for you. At home against New Orleans, week 1. Okay, a trip to Buffalo, week 2. But then the Jets, the Panthers, the Cardinals. If the Lions aren't at least 4-1 by the bye, week 6, then they got issues. So we got 4 wins before the bye. And then a couple of division games, granted. But both are at home against the Packers and the Vikings. You win at least one of those. Let's say you split, all right? Let's say you're 5-2 after week 8. Then you go to Miami. That's a win, 6-2. Home against New England. Home against Tampa. Let's be conservative and say you split those, okay? You're 7-3 going into week 12 in a home game against the Bears. The Bears. I won't say whether you win that one or not, but I will say down the stretch in your final 7 games, you split with the Bears. Okay, so we're at 8-4 now. Atlanta, Tennessee, the Giants. You win at least 2 of those. You're 10-5. A game on the road against Minnesota. Let's just say that's a division loss. Okay, you're 10-6. You're at Green Bay in week 18. 10-7 gets you into the playoffs as a wild card. 11-6 might be enough to win the division. The Lions are going back to the playoffs because of the schedule as much as anything else. They're my number 1 team to get back to the... Let's just do rankings. Rankings are fun. Lions are my number 1 team to return to the playoffs. Bengals are number 2 on my list because I really do. I've said it before. I'm buying in. Maybe I'm not as far in as Burrow on this team, but I do really like the changes they tried to make to their defense. 3, it's Cowboys. It's Cowboys. They upgraded the league's, right there with Cincinnati as one of the leagues, if not the league's worst defense. They made some upgrades there. Caleb Downs, I think, is going to be massive for them. Pickens, at least for the time being, seems to be not upset. I don't know if happy is the word. They're going to score 30 a game. So Dallas would be number 3 on that list for me, behind the Lions and the Bengals of teams that I most expect to return to the playoffs. I think I'd have Tampa 4th on the list. I do. I think whether things get settled with Baker Mayfield or not, one of 2 things happens. 1, Baker gets paid, Baker's happy, and Baker goes out to fight and prove that he's worth the deal. Or Baker doesn't get an extension, looks around and says, all right, Tampa Bay Bucks, you want to FAFO? Let's FO. Let's find out. I'm going to show you. And I'm going to show the league what's available on the free agent market. and Mayfield goes out and balls out. Can he keep it up for an entire season, unlike just the first 7 or 8 weeks like he did last year? Remains to be seen. But I think, again, if you're looking at Tampa and their schedule, they get the AFC North. Okay, that could be a problem, but you look at the NFC South, Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans, that's at least 4 wins for the Bucs. Should be, anyway. So I'd have Tampa high on the list as well, right behind Detroit, Cincinnati, and Dallas. Of the 5 teams that I think most people are talking about as teams that will return to the playoffs this year after missing them last year, the team I have at the bottom of the list of those 5 is the Baltimore Ravens. Oh, he's just being a dumb Steelers fan. I knew he'd do that. No. I have serious questions about the Ravens. I know I've mentioned it before. There's no reason to expect Derrick Henry to break down all of a sudden. And I'm not saying he will, but at a certain point, he's going to hit the cliff. And the older he gets, the more likely it becomes. The offensive line has 4 dudes who literally, 3 of them will be driving Amazon vans in September rather than playing football, battling for the starting center spot. They didn't do, I shouldn't say anything. They drafted Surratt out of Indiana. But they really didn't do much to address their wide receiver depth. And in my opinion, they didn't do enough on defense either. And you've got a rookie head coach. Jesse Minter may do a lot to help that Ravens defense refine their aggressive nature. Go after the football. Go after the quarterback. But I don't think it necessarily happens from the drop. So I've got Baltimore 5th on that list. And who knows, maybe all 5 teams return to the playoffs. Detroit, Cincinnati, Dallas, Tampa, Baltimore. There's another one I didn't mention. Because I'm out on them this year. That's the Chiefs. I'm not saying they have another 6-win season for sure. I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked by it. Denver and LA are both better than them. Mahomes is going to have rust. I'm sorry. People don't take into enough account how hard it is to not just come back from a catastrophic injury and get on the field, which it looks increasingly like Mahomes will be able to do by week 1. And who says he doesn't? But to come back and actually play like yourself again. I know I've used this comparison before. I will use it again. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, is a great comparison. When he came back from the broken leg, yes, he got back on the field, but I'd say for 2 months, 6 to 8 weeks, he didn't really look like himself. It happens all the time. Guys have a major injury, in not just football either, in a lot of major sports. You have a major injury that keeps you out for at least a year, if not close to a year. When you come back, the first couple of months, first few weeks at the very least, but first couple of months more often than not, you're back on the field and you're doing your damnedest, but you simply do not look like yourself. And I think that's going to be what we get from Mahomes. Kelsey's a year older. Another team that didn't do nearly enough, if anything, really, to address the receiving room. I think the Chiefs are in a bad spot going into this year, to be honest. I'm not saying 6-11, but I'm sure as hell not betting on 9-8 and back in the playoffs, 10-7 back in the playoffs. They would actually be at the bottom of this list. If we're talking about teams looking to return to the playoffs. I was going to make it a 5-team list, but it was a list on the fly. So it turned into a 6-team list. And yes, I put Kansas City at the bottom. Detroit, Cincy, Dallas, Tampa, Baltimore, Kansas City. but I'm just to bring it full circle here. I am warning Bengals fans. If it does not work out, I am telling you right now, the second the final game is over, the Burrow getting out of Cincinnati chatter will start. If it doesn't include a playoff appearance. And I would keep an eye out for how Burrow continues to build the narrative leading up to and through the season. Coming up in less than an hour, in about 45 minutes, right around 11:20 Eastern, 8:20 Pacific, a former U.S. men's national team great will join us to talk about this year's World Cup team. Eric Winalda is going to join us here today on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports. But coming up next, the Knicks parade is underway in New York. I don't know if we've gotten anything crazy yet. We may check in on it live just to see if we are getting any kind of nonsense. Plus, the owner kind of threw a wet blanket over the whole thing before the parade even started this morning. That's next right here on Westwood One Sports.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
What are they going to do tomorrow afternoon with Christian Pulisic, U.S. men's national team? Do they need to push to have him back in the lineup tomorrow afternoon against Australia? We'll get into that a little bit later, right around 11:20. Former U.S. men's national team great Eric Winalda going to join us. He also has WTF, Winalda Talks Football, every week on Sirius XM, where we also happen to be live across North America every single day. Westwood One Sports on channel 375 on Sirius XM. Also, inside your Westwood One Sports app or your Odyssey app, AUDACY. Speaking of the footy, though, you can use a no-sweat goal scorer token on a qualifying anytime goal scorer, first goal scorer, or last goal scorer bet during the World's game and get bonus bets if you don't win. Sweating your bets? Give it the boot with BetMGM. Download the BetMGM app today, and please gamble responsibly. We will, once they start getting to the nonsense portion of the parade and celebration in New York, attempt to check in on that. Because I'm here for it. I'm here for just the idea that there are a few days where there are no rules. Okay, and you can get away with just about anything. Championship Parade Celebration Day is one of those days. Like Jason Kelce can go up in front of 250,000 people and drop like 37 F-bombs, and everybody just laughs, goes, oh, this is so much fun, isn't it, Bill? Yes, it is, Chris. Look at this. He just dropped an MF backed up by 2 Fs, and everybody goes, oh, look at these guys. Oh, they're just having so much fun, aren't they? And to be honest, I'm right there with it. I'm totally fine with that. But there really is there are very few opportunities where people could get away with that. And news anchors, rather than going into the immediate hushed tones that you usually get when somebody swears on the air, like somebody drops an F-bomb on the air, like during a live man on the street interview, immediately the anchors cut in. Oh, Christina, we apologize to our audience for that kind of language being used here on the air. We don't approve of it, and we apologize that you, the viewer, were victim to such foul, abusive, cruel, blue language. Meanwhile, a guy goes up on a stage after a championship parade and basically recites the lyrics to a 2 Live Crew song, and everybody goes, oh, they're having so much fun, aren't they? One day a year you get that dichotomy, and it's Championship Parade Celebration Day. And again, I'm totally here for it. So once we start to get some of the nonsense in New York, we'll try and check in on that if we can, depending on how long it takes the parade route to get to the staging area and all that. There was a little bit of a wet blanket thrown on the whole thing, though, yesterday. If you're a Knicks fan, I don't know, what level of sobriety you've been working with over the last 6 days that you may have seen this and actually, comprehended or processed the news. But Jim Dolan, the owner of the Knicks, said yesterday that he's not willing to go into the second apron to keep this team together. This was just 4 days after being on stage in San Antonio at the immediate post-game celebration and trophy presentation and saying, I'm so sorry, New York fans. It won't be so long next time. Go Knicks! And then he immediately says, wait just a second. I've spent a lot of money on the Sphere. Look, in reality with Dolan, it's not about what he's actually willing to spend or not spend. If it were an unlimited amount of money, I believe the dude would spend it. It's more about how punitive that second apron is in the NBA's current CBA. They were just $200,000 under that second apron this past season. And yes, their starting five are all under contract. But when you look at some of the hits you take to the ability to trade draft picks, to where your draft picks may fall in the draft, if you have too many years of going into the second apron, how it makes it very restrictive to sign nearly anybody in free agency, and also makes it more difficult to keep some of your own players based on things like the mid-level exception. And it creates a lot of obstacles. So I understand, in theory anyway, hey, we want to avoid the second apron because it actually gives us a little more flexibility to be light on our toes. And if we lose Landry Shamet or Jose Alvarado, or if we lose Mitchell Robinson clanking free throws off the front of the rim, we're fine with that. But I would just caution just a little bit, because I know in the afterglow of a championship, everybody wants to keep everybody, right? Fans are like, oh, no, you've got to keep them all. And I've been in that position before as a fan. I understand the inclination to want to keep the band together. But I do think if it's going to put you in position to end the run that much sooner because of the restrictive nature of hitting the second apron, especially if you do it more than once, then I understand Dolan tapping the brakes on that concept and saying, hey, you're going to have to lose the guys. Again, you're not losing any of your starting five. Mitchell Robinson's impact, his loss would be felt, but maybe you've got the ability then to go out and backfill that position some other way in free agency. Is that true? Are they really in a tornado watch right now in New York? Tornado watch, not the same as a tornado warning. I know there were some thunderstorms or some rain that was supposed to roll through. That'll really crush the parade vibes. Bad weather. Like, I've been in Super Bowl parades in the month of February, obviously, where it was like bitter cold. And I never saw it slow down anyone. Thunderstorms, though, yeah, that could ruin a parade real easily. And what do? You've gotten it started already. I mean, people were lining up on Broadway around 11 o'clock last night to get an early seat along the parade route. So you can't send them home. You're not going to be halfway through the parade and be like, oh, wait. Yeah. Thunderstorm watch, tornado watch, pick up the ticker tape, guys. Put it away. We'll try again tomorrow. Nah, you got to just kind of roll with it. You're stuck. Has anyone really ever, because I'm hopeful that the weather does hold out in New York and we do get at least one of those wild, goofy, silly, crazy moments where somebody says or does something weird or stupid or funny. Has anyone ever stopped to consider just how hammered Tom Brady must have been after that Tampa Bay Bucks Super Bowl win? When he's literally throwing the Lombardi trophy from one boat to another, and then finally gets off the boat and stumbles his way, with help, back to wherever he was going. Like, I have good friends, neighbors of mine, that have a breathalyzer. It gives you the readout. And there have been times when we have hung out and we've had way too much fun and I've blown into that thing. You really gotta, like, and then just when you think you're done blowing into it, it's like, nope, keep going. And the number was ridiculous. And I felt simultaneous pride and shame all at the same time. What do we really think Brady would have blown into that breathalyzer that day? My man was gone. Or Did he just have such a low tolerance from, the restrictive diet, the avocado ice cream, all of that, like 2 tequilas and he was gone for the day? Everybody just immediately jumped in the chat. Bill might have started with a 3, definitely a 2. Good point by Mike, too, our video producer. His body fat percentage is probably minuscule. He can't process it. He had to just be hammered. Do we think OG Anunoby has finally... Do we think his brain is out from underneath the soft, warm blanket of whatever edibles influenced him on Good Morning America on Monday? Do we think he's actually able to form words and sentences today? We'll keep you up to date on how the parade shenanigans are going in New York throughout the remainder of the show. The Power Hour on the way. Eric Winalda going to join us at 11:20 to talk World Cup and the U.S. taking on Australia tomorrow. But coming up next, the PR push to buff out the dents in Brendan Sorsby's public image has officially started. We'll let you hear some of what his agent had to say yesterday. That's next, right here on Westwood One Sports.
Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
And here we are, the final hour of the show on this terrific Thursday on Westwood One Sports. It's You Better You Bet, the Power Hour. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos. Coming up in 20 minutes, we talked to a guy who's been there before, competing for our country in the World Cup. Eric Winalda, former U.S. men's national team great, will join us. He also hosts WTF, Winalda Talks Football, on Sirius XM. And we'll ask him the question that I think most American soccer fans are wondering about right now. How far are you willing to push Christian Pulisic to be back tomorrow against Australia? It'll be a 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific kick tomorrow. A win secures a spot in the round of 32. A draw may even do that, but would create maybe a few more questions going to the final group match against Turkey next week. But how much do you want to push to have Pulisic back for that match tomorrow against Australia? Or is it more important, now that you got an emphatic win in the first game this past weekend against Paraguay, to say, you know what? We don't need to push him that hard. We've got a deep squad. We'll talk to Eric Winalda about all of that, like I said, coming up in about 20 minutes here on You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM. We will check in on the Knicks parade if we actually get any nonsense. Right now, it's just the parade. I believe it's actually raining in Manhattan, so maybe not the best atmosphere for a parade, but on a championship celebratory parade kind of day, I don't know how much rain matters, depending on what kind it is. But we'll check on that when we get a chance, assuming there's any nonsense that we feel like, okay, you got to hear this. Here in the final hour of today's edition of You Better You Bet. We've already talked, though, about Brendan Sorsby. We had Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports on earlier. He hosts With the First Pick. He and Rand Carthon, their podcast, available wherever you get your audio. They talk draft 365 days a year. And Ryan laid out what he thought the possibilities would have been for Brendan Sorsby had he gone into this past April's draft without any of the baggage connected to him that's now connected to him. And he thought, it's entirely possible Sorsby could have gone second overall to the Jets. And the Jets, I think, despite drafting Cade Klubnik in the 4th round this year and trading up to do so, I think the Jets are still a team, especially with 3 first-round picks, that would not shock me at all if they're one of those teams willing to bid a first-round pick for Brendan Sorsby. Spend a year behind Geno. If things get bad, Klubnik steps in, you find out what you have in Klubnik, and then Sorsby comes along next year. And maybe you've got 2 young guys battling it out next year in New York. Very similar to what the Steelers are doing in Pittsburgh, where it's, hey, the final year of Aaron Rodgers, and then we'll move on and let Will Howard and Drew Aller battle it out. I mean, neither one of those quarterback battles, just to be clear, if that's the way it were to go, let's say Sorsby ends up with the Jets, okay? Let me just play this out. We're going to hear something his agent had to say yesterday morning in just a second. But I want to talk the football part of the equation first. Neither one of those quarterback battles would be particularly inspiring, I don't think. I mean, interesting, yes. And I especially say that as a Steelers fan. To watch Will Howard and Drew Aller next summer battling it out for a starting quarterback job, it might not end well, but sure as hell will be interesting. Same thing would go in New York. If they somehow won Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft and you got him and Cade Klubnik going at it next year, or maybe even later this fall, after whatever happens with Geno Smith happens and you move on. There have been some other interesting possibilities for Sorsby's landing spot mentioned. Tyler Morales, one of our producers on the show Tuesday, said, hey, why not Detroit? Ryan Wilson pushed back on that just a little bit, saying he didn't think the off-field issue would be one that the Lions would want to deal with. Okay. Ryan did mention Seattle, though. As you look at those spots around the league where, hey, we're willing to take a flyer on this guy at like a 4th-round pick and have him developing in the background. just sort of simmering on the back burner over there. I, though, for my money, am most intrigued at what happens. What gets a team, I should say, to give up a pick that most of us didn't think would be in play with Sorsby? Maybe that pick that would have made sense before this whole story came to pass. And when some were looking at his talent, just his talent and not any of the off-field stuff, and saying, no, he could be a first-round pick, as Ryan Wilson said earlier. And part of what it's going to take for general managers to get back around to that point, where they're willing to spend some pretty high draft capital, if not a first-round pick, then a second-day pick, a second or third rounder. It's going to take a real belief in those front offices that may be interested in Brendan Sorsby, a real belief that this was a terrible mistake, but a dumb mistake made by an 18-year-old kid who wasn't even on the travel roster for his team at the time that he made the bets when he was a freshman at Indiana. And we believe that all of that is well in the past, and there's enough talent there to counterbalance or counterweigh whatever concerns we have about off-the-field issues. It's going to take them believing that. And the first step in getting teams to believe that is, well, the PR game that has started already. Started yesterday, actually, yesterday morning, just a little more than 24 hours ago. Ron Slavin, who is Sorsby's agent, was on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas with Sean and RJ and talked about, it was a wide-ranging interview. They did a great job talking to him over the course of about 20 minutes or so yesterday morning in Dallas. But one of the things that you're going to hear most often, whether it's from that interview or any others that Sorsby's agent does over the next 3.5 weeks, what you're going to hear most often is what I just mentioned a couple moments ago. It's an 18-year-old kid. He made a mistake. And most of all, he's ultimately a good guy now who's learned his lesson. And that's essentially the way Ron Slavin laid it out yesterday on The Fan in Dallas. Listen to this.
If you go human being, he's the first overall pick. He's a great kid. There's nothing that you're ever going to have to worry about him off the field. The apps on his phones and all that has been taken care of, and I really don't think it's going to be an issue moving forward. I don't think he's got that type of personality. And on the field, he's, like I said, he's 6'3", 235. I believe if we had him run a 40, he's going to run in the 4.4s.
That's Ron Slavin, Brendan Sorsby's agent, yesterday on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas with Sean and RJ, talking about Brendan Sorsby. Nobody's questioning, I don't think, the talent. The talent is there. There are some questions football-wise about the decision-making and the processing of coverages and reads and all that. That's stuff that if the athletic traits and skills exist, you work through that with a young quarterback and hope that, especially with a year of developmental processes behind him, he gets past it with some on-field work, and before you know it, he's putting that arm talent and athletic ability to good use as your starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't think there's much doubt about whether his talent is worth what would be a first or second day pick in the draft, rounds 1 through 3. It's that stuff that Slavin started talking about there. And he did it in such, this is why this guy's getting paid. He's good at it. He did it in such a way that look, NFL personnel guys, their entire life, because they spend their whole life around football and trying to evaluate talent, their whole life is spoken in draft terms, draft acquisition cost, right? Like, they go out to dinner with their buddies and they're like, oh, I've had the steak here before, man. It's a top 10 overall pick. Oh, yeah, I played golf there once. It's a 4th rounder. Don't go out of your way. Like, everything gets talked about that way. And so what does Ron Slavin do, Brendan Sorsby's agent? He immediately lays it out in their terms when he's asked about Sorsby the human yesterday. Ugh. As a human, he's first overall pick. Oh, he just latched right in. That's a little earworm that's just going to stick in those scouts and GMs' heads. Oh, as a human, he's a first overall pick. Now, look, doesn't matter that most agents are going to talk about their players that way, especially one who has got questions about his character now because of off-field issues. But man, he nailed that. Good job, Ron. I'm giving you a golf clap for that. But that's the biggest question here is, can they rehabilitate his image over the next 3 weeks? Again, just to give you the details on how this works, I want to make sure I have it right. The NFL supplemental draft has to take place on or before July 16th because it has to take place at least 1 week before the first training camps are expected to open around the league. So it has to happen on or before July 16th, which is amateur math in my head, back of the envelope math, as they say. Now, actually, just exactly 4 weeks from today, 28 days. So you've got 4 weeks, essentially, with maybe some workouts or a sort of an impromptu type pro day event to convince teams, look, you like the physical skills and gifts. I'm telling you that as much as you like those, the young man behind those physical skills and gifts understands the mistake he made, and he is just as good a human as he is a football player. He's as a human, first overall pick. Man, that's silky smooth. But I do find it interesting, and this is the back half of that I wonder if he did handle that well, that he mentions that his phone apps are on lockdown. Like, is this like when my 13-year-old kid has an app request and I've got to approve it? Now, I'm not here to belittle the guardrails that you need to put in place to keep an addict from going back to the behavior that got them in trouble in the first place. And again, they're saying Sorsby was an addict and was treated as such. If that's the case, if he's really a gambling addict, which I'll be honest, somewhat flies in the face of, oh, this was just an 18-year-old making an honest mistake when he was 18 years old. Okay. Which one is it? A big dumb mistake when you're 18? Or something that you did often enough to become habit? Habitual enough that you're being treated for an addiction to it? That's a question for those investigative teams, those detective teams that each of the 32 NFL teams have. That's a question for them to suss out. But if you're really truly an addict, you're always an addict, right? That's what you're taught about it. A relapse could happen. You could be clean and sober for 20 years and a relapse could happen. And again, I'm not here to belittle the guardrails that people put around themselves in their life that they feel need to be in place to manage their addictions. But a lot of NFL GMs, they're going to look at that and say, is it true your phone's still, like, the apps, your app store is locked down? Like, you can't use certain apps? Are you still at the point where you feel like if they weren't locked up, you'd go back to doing that? Have fun answering that landmine with the GMs that you may sit down and talk to over the next 4 weeks. So that's where I come back around to, look, somebody may jump on Sorsby with a high pick, maybe a second-round pick, maybe a third-round pick. But I think a lot of teams are going to look at this and say, I'm not yet totally sold on this guy being ready to not just tackle the football portion of the thing, no pun intended, but also tackle the life portion of the thing right alongside it. That's going to be Sorsby's people's jobs over the next 4 weeks to continue that PR push that they started yesterday morning on the Fan in Dallas. The World Cup continues. Today, we launch into the second round of group play matches, now that the first set is done. More teams than ever means a longer time between matches before we get to the second ones in group play. And tomorrow afternoon, that includes the U.S. against Australia. And the question is, will Christian Pulisic be ready for that match? Should he be pushed to be ready for that match? Given the way the U.S. played last Friday night in their opening match and how good they looked, do they need to push to have Pulisic back tomorrow afternoon against Australia? Or do they need to play this more cautiously to ensure there is no further injury and he's available for the knockout rounds? We will talk to a guy who has been there representing our country in the World Cup. Former U.S. men's national team great Eric Winalda joins us next here on You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Está para Gio. Reina, reina.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
I only understood like 10% of the words. Doesn't matter. There's nothing better than the Telemundo call of a Claudio Reyna goal from Friday night's win in the U.S. opener of the World Cup. They play again tomorrow afternoon. Does it necessarily mean Christian Pulisic has to be back tomorrow afternoon, given how impressive the U.S. was in that opening win? As we pivot into the second games of 3 in group play in the World Cup, we will talk to Eric Winalda in just a moment here on You Better You Bet. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on Westwood One Sports. Always inside the Westwood One Sports app and your Odyssey app as well, and live across North America on Sirius XM Channel 375. 2 of those host nations in North America will also play today before the U.S. hosts Australia tomorrow. So a lot to talk about from the first set of group play matches. And like I said, who better to talk to about it than a man who has represented our country in the World Cup, former U.S. men's national team great Eric Winalda joins us now on Westwood One Sports. Morning, Eric. How are you?
I'm good. You know what you did? What I do all the time. You get Claudio and Gio mixed up because that.
Oh, did I say Claudio?
Yeah, but I do it all the time. So I thank you for making me feel better about that.
You know, you have a good excuse. I'm supposed to be on top of these things. When you played with one of the guys, like that's an honest
I just
mistake.
talked to him. Yeah, I'm making sure that we don't have to experience what we experienced last time. It's a much different World Cup this go around for Gio than it was the last time, and no controversy as of yet. So we're pretty happy with the way things are going.
Well, before we get to Christian Pulisic, the CAF being available for the Australia match tomorrow, let's just start with what we saw Friday night. And I guess, is this the kind of thing, because teams, when there's a lot of pressure on them, as there have been on this U.S. men's national team leading up to the World Cup, one of two things can happen when you have a great start to a competition the way they did Friday night. There could be a little bit of an exhale, and you can go, okay, everything's all right. Or you look at it and go, no, you know what? Bleep it. We knew we were dialed in and we're still dialed in. Do you expect that killer instinct to follow through the rest of group play now?
I do, actually. Momentum is everything in a World Cup scenario. We had one of the best starts. I mean, obviously Germany, Norway also putting up a big number. But yeah, this is, I'm not patting myself on the back, but there's been a lot of naysayers, a lot of people that were down on this team, mainly because of the results coming in. But you could kind of work out, if you really had a trained eye, at what Pochettino was up to. And this might be a surprise to many, but I really feel like this team is well poised to have another big performance. Now, this is Australia, who we didn't expect to beat Turkey, and it's a different proposition, and it might mean some changes in our lineup, especially with Christian being protected right now. And I got some status on that if you want it, but I expect him to play, but I don't think it's imperative that he plays from the start in this game.
So I'll put you in Mauricio's boots then, so to speak, Eric. And if you're told, hey, Christian Pulisic is good, he can play tomorrow afternoon, but you've already got an impactful win and 3 points banked, bigger field advancing, a round of 32 out there waiting, where you don't have to necessarily finish first or even second in your group to advance to the knockout stages. Would you, if you were in those boots, feel inclined to tell Christian, listen, I want you healthy for the knockout rounds. I don't need you Friday afternoon against Australia?
Well, need and want, I mean, it's very, very touch and go there. But I think that under the circumstances, only they really know what his status is. Like, only Christian can know. I know what I've been told. It's not that they put him in bubble wrap, but he did sustain a kick prior to the game. So it didn't happen in the game. This was just something like more or less a bruise that blood needed some time to get out of there. And it tightened up on him at halftime. So the precautionary, okay, we're winning 3-0 at halftime. Brilliant start. Don't need you. Let's see how this all plays out. Very smart, in my opinion. In this particular game against Australia, let's go back in time. The last time they played, Haji Wright got both goals, but it was an early exit for Christian Pulisic because they started kicking him early. And that's would be the approach in the circumstances if he played. If you watch the game, the way Paraguay dealt with him, they double teamed him, but Christian did a really good job of being aggressive going into those one-on-one battles, one-on-two battles on a couple of occasions, and really being a problem. It'll be more of the same if he plays, but the thing is that you got to understand something, and Pochettino knows this. They're going to kick him. Their plan A is if he gets the ball, don't let him breathe. And it's just really going to come down to the tactics of the game. If you ask me really, what would I do if I'm in Pochettino's shoes? I'm playing with two forwards. I'm going to keep those guys occupied. I'm not going to play with one forward. Balogun was great, but he could use some help in a game like this to keep those big boys occupied and allow the wing play to really be prevalent in this game, meaning Jedi Robinson, Sergino Dest, and possibly Timothy Weah. So if you go that route, you wouldn't need someone like Christian Pulisic to be in the game because he wouldn't be a second forward. He wouldn't play the 10. He'd ask Gio Reyna to do that, who had a great start as well. So there's a lot of options in there. And I love the fact that this coach is totally and completely willing to flip the script whenever he gets a gut feeling about how the opposition is dealing with us. He has trained these guys to have the ability to go from a 3-4-3 to a 4-3-3 to a 3-5-2 on a snap. So that's what makes us really dangerous right now, is that we have a coach and a team that is very unpredictable. Now, this situation with Christian, we all want to see him play. They took the captain's band away, which was the smartest thing they ever did, so he can focus just on playing and not the coin flip and all the other responsibilities that go with captain. But this is a unique one, and I think we've analyzed Australia. We know what they're all about. We're worried about their speed up top. And if Tim Ream can run with these guys if he gets out of position. So it's an interesting one. Tactically, we might see 2 or 3 switches in our system within the body of this game. So it's a cool one.
Based on what you saw Friday and just what you've seen in the run-up to this World Cup as well, Eric, what's your gut feeling on moving on to the knockout round, how far it can go? What's the ceiling for this team, given the depth that they've shown and also the star power?
Depth is everything, man. We've seen this with other teams. France showed us how good they can be, with when they look to the bench, and then those guys. And England did it yesterday, who I think they were far better once they put their, the Rashfords of the world on the field, as opposed to Gordon. So we have those options. We have guys on the bench that are chomping at the bit, ready to play. I do think that we are poised to have a really deep run in this competition. Obviously, you've kind of laid it out there, 48 teams. All the permutations they're kind of crazy. Like, we don't know if somebody else has a bad game and we win the group, and a really good team had a bad start, like a Brazil or something, and you can end up with a big name just because they didn't have a particularly good start, and even though they came in third in their group. So it's really tricky, but I don't think we're afraid of anybody right now at all. I get it. We lost to Belgium and everybody freaked out. Paraguay wasn't the best version of themselves. We had a pretty good game against Germany in sustaining a loss, but man, I was impressed. I was there in stadium for that one in Chicago, seeing it live and being around the guys and kind of feeling that vibe. This is a good team. They've been through a lot, man. The adversity they went through in the last World Cup, the experiences they gained from that, coupled with the home crowd, because Seattle's going to be insane. It can take their game to a whole new level. And it happened in '94. I got to be honest. When you put your hand on your heart, and you look up the Pasadena, crowd, and you realize, oh my God, I'm about to play in a World Cup game 30 minutes from where I grew up. Something happens to you, and you end up getting results the way we did against a team that was far better than us in Colombia. But on the day, we were great. And that's what you need to be. And that's what the crowd can do for this group because they're very talented.
Eric Winalda, former U.S. men's national team great, also hosts WTF. Winalda Talks Football on Sirius XM is with us here on Westwood One Sports. How much of that ability to go deep into this World Cup, Eric, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the way they've started because it's been phenomenal to this point, but how much do you think it has to do with the fact that the very top of this field, other than, like you mentioned, Germany had a great start to this tournament, that the top of this field may not quite be as strong based on what we saw from Spain, an underwhelming draw, disappointing draw for them in their first match. Some of the other teams near the top of this perhaps didn't overwhelm and impress the way they were expected to in their first group play matches.
Well, it's kind of a catch-22, man. I mean, we call that doing the Italy. Italy usually, they're not in this competition, believe it or not, but they usually start slow and then build momentum. We started this conversation about momentum. Catching momentum early without getting yourself winded too early is the secret. And usually that trajectory, when it starts to go in the right direction, serves you well. So I think Spain is still very, very good. They need to worry about them. Argentina without Messi, I don't know what they are. It was really unique to see him have such a big night. I think the other players in this, I mean, usually the Brazils and the Germanys of the world are always a part of that conversation. But I think this is honestly the first time that as Americans, instead of this arrival into the world's game, this is actually the arrival into the conversation where if you start talking about the World Cup, about which teams had a really good start, and you give it your top five, the U.S. is in there. They're in there as one of the teams that everybody else is looking at saying, man, what are they all about? That looked pretty good. So that confidence and this Friday game, I mean, it's a big deal. Australia knows us well. We know how they play. They're going to make it hard. Expect a low-scoring affair, but I think we get out of there with a victory. Now, under those circumstances, now we go into the Turkey game knowing that we're already so Pochettino can scale back and treat this like the marathon that it's going to be. Don't have to risk injury on some of the other guys. Some guys will get some much needed rest. And that will be the telling point. This next game on Friday is everything. It'll give us direction. It'll give us the ability to really plan out the next stages and then start looking around and preparing for who we might play. So we're in a good spot. We're in a really good spot. Never been in this good of a spot, to be honest, in a World Cup scenario.
Eric Winalda with us here on Westwood One Sports. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today here on You Better You Bet. I mentioned the disappointing draw for Spain early on. Some of these teams, European nations, over the fans, overanalyze things to a great degree. Is it overanalysis for Portugal fans to look at Ronaldo and say, what's going on here? Are we in a bad spot? Because every team that has not gotten production from a star early on, as great a day as it was for stars on Tuesday in particular, you mentioned Lionel Messi and the hat trick. Ronaldo was one of the ones that did not show up in his country's first match the way he was expected to. Is that just European overreaction to one match, fan overreaction to one match? Or is there something there that makes you question whether he's still got enough gas left in the tank?
It's not even gas. I don't think he has wheels. I don't think he has the structure of a car. It's really sad, actually. I mean, you mentioned the stars showing up. Erling Haaland needs to be thrown into that list. Harry Kane had a big day. Ronaldo is not the player he used to be. He slows that team down. It's more of a coaching question. Roberto Martinez had Belgium in probably the best phase, and he wasn't able to get it over the line with those guys because of the big egos and the big names on that team. I think, honestly, you asked me what I would do if I was Pochettino. I kind of told you, man, if I was Roberto Martinez, I would run Ronaldo into the ground. I would keep him out there as long as he could because he's not going to sustain. He will not be a part of the conversation if he just can't do it. And it's obvious. The problem is that his ego gets in the way. There's one play, man. There's one play where he could have solved all the problems, right? The ball gets down the wing. It's crossed. I think Conceição had the ball, and it's a great ball to Bruno Fernandes, if we're going to call him Bruno Fernandes. That's the way they say it. And he had every opportunity to let that go through his legs, dummy it, and let Bruno get the goal. And he didn't. He tried to do something spectacular, and he just doesn't have that in his locker anymore. So I honestly believe, and this is probably, mean of me to say this, but if he went down with a hamstring, I think you'd probably get a silent fist bump out of 15 guys going, oh, thank God we don't have to deal with him anymore. Now let's go. Now we can run. Now we can play. Because he is certainly slowing them down.
Eric Winaldo with us here on You Better You Bet, talking World Cup. We know the U.S. plays Australia tomorrow, but there are 3 host nations for this thing, and 2 of them play today, Eric. Mexico is the more interesting side for me because I think that game against South Korea could be really, really entertaining if both teams let themselves open it up the way I would imagine they want to. You think of a close matchup, an evenly matched up game like this one, though, maybe there's a little more conservative gameplay. How do you expect Mexico, South Korea to play out later tonight? Because I think it could be the best match of the day.
It could be. It's a wait for it scenario. I mean, one of the things about playing in Mexico is you have to understand is that the elevation always kicks in. It makes things problematic. So what we saw in that first game out of the gates, 3 red cards, the ball was all over the place, guys were losing their composure. Played in Azteca, I know what happens to you. And it's usually around about the 74th minute, to be honest, where you just can't think. And your body's just is screaming, I can't do this under these conditions if you're not acclimated. Now, the good thing is maybe Korea has had enough time to get acclimated to the environment. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be a great game. The fun bet on this one is a late penalty kick for Mexico. That I would, it's a flyer, but it usually happens. It's not just in CONCACAF, and that's because the opposition gets tired, is late on a tackle, or isn't thinking right, and it's a handball or anything. But penalty kick is a good shout for Mexico against this Korean side. I don't expect them to lose their discipline the way the other game went. So red cards could be tricky, but if you're late on the tackle a few times and you get a referee who is pretty quick to the pocket and you get 2 yellows, this game could really open up. I say 2-1 to Mexico. I think that'll be the final scoreline. I think Korea gets some joy out of this, but they'll probably fall on their sword the way everybody does in those circumstances. It's a tough place to play.
Before I let you run, Eric, I got to ask because it's sports radio. It's what we do. It's sports talk. We sometimes throw out predictions. I'm going to ask you, how deep do you think this U.S. men's national team can go in this World Cup? Semifinals.
Yeah, I think it's all there, man. I do. You look at some of the other runs that, and history will tell you this. South Korea, for example, when they hosted, and that sea of red, it was amazing. It was that we tied them, and they ended up going to a semifinal that year. And they got some luck. They had some good fortune, and they had some referee calls that went their way. But that's what a World Cup is. You have to be good, right? You have to be talented. You have to get some good fortune. You have to have some little bit of luck, and you got to be there. My dad used to say that, and I never knew what it meant. But you got to be there. You got to be in the moment and ready for the moment. You got to be prepared to play. This team is we like to say checking all those boxes, but man, this team is well prepared. If they get a little good fortune and they force the issue, right? If they're ruthless, they can make something special happen. Like I said, I got to see him in Chicago, and they asked, you have any advice for the guys? And because there's always these comparisons to our generation and other generations, and is this the best team we've ever had? And the only advice I told them was, I said, man, just pay attention to the last verse of our anthem. That's the best advice anybody can ever give you. Home of the brave. Be brave. You want to impress us? Be brave. You're talented enough. So just don't back out of this. Seize the moment and go. And if they're brave and if they have courage to play up to their talent level, I mean, sky's the limit. I still think they're going to semifinals. I said that from the beginning, man. I've been killed for that, especially with some of the results they had coming in. But this team's talented enough, and that 12th man factor will factor in. You watch. It's going to get good. It's going to be a great World Cup.
Great stuff, Eric. Thank you so much for taking the time this morning. We appreciate it, and we look forward to the rest of this World Cup playing out. But your insight, invaluable. Thanks again.
Yeah, call me anytime.
Yep, Eric Winalda. WTF, Winalda Talks Football on Sirius XM, former U.S. men's national team star. We really appreciate him taking the time. And you heard him say there, he was asked when they played one of those last few matches in the run-up to this thing in Chicago to address the team. And he gave his advice, play brave, play like you believe you can get there. And he believes they can get to the semifinals, which, I mean, you just look at the odds at BetMGM and you see a team that's listed, let's see, 10th, I believe, on the board at BetMGM to win the whole thing. That would tell you they're not a top 4 team. But he's been saying it for a while, Eric Winalda, and appreciate his insight on Christian Pulisic, the way Mauricio Pochettino has managed this thing to this point, some of the other stars that have shown up. I couldn't believe what he said about Cristiano Ronaldo. Like, if he came up lame, you'd get the rest of the bench and roster looking at each other going, silent fist pump. Wow, how the mighty have fallen. Great stuff from Eric. Really appreciate him. If you missed it, that's why it'll be up in podcast form as soon as the show is over, wherever you get your podcast. Just search You Better You Bet. Coming up next, our favorite moments of the show. We may have some Winalda in there as well. The 3 stars of the day on the way next to wrap up You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Welcome back to You Better You Bet on Westwood One Sports.
Kind of disappointed we haven't had anything ridiculous yet from the Knicks championship parade, but the parade is still ongoing. They haven't yet ascended the podium, I guess, whatever it's called, the stage, where I'm sure we may get some nonsense. I will say this is a tough look, and I think this is accurate. I don't think it's AI, but I saw someone post on social media that they hung at City Hall in New York, which I believe is the end of the parade route. They hung a bunch of giant banners with jersey numbers and names of all the players. And right up there with a number 33 on it is Jones, for Dylan Jones. Dylan Jones has never worn 33 for the Knicks because 33 is retired. It was Patrick Ewing's number. So somebody screwed up with the banners. But hey, nice try. And you know what? Like I say all the time about championship celebration parade days, you can screw up and nobody cares. You can do something wildly dumb and inappropriate and everybody gets over it because everybody's celebrating. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, our 3 stars of the day, our 3 favorite moments of the show. I will tell you, because I mentioned it when Eric Winaldo was on a couple minutes ago, I think Mexico, South Korea, by World Cup standards, is going to be a banger. I think it's going to be a really good one, a tight, evenly matched up game. I think both, rather than playing conservatively, will try to push some pace offensively, be aggressive. Mexico, more size, more physicality, gives them an advantage in set pieces. So I like Mexico at plus 105 and over 2.5 goals at plus 155. With all of the world's top stars going head-to-head on the pitch, you can grab an odds boost token, join the excitement, and make your World's Game moment. Activate your token for any World's Game bet, and you'll receive a bigger payout if your bet wins. Real simple. Your World's Game odds boost token has already been dropped into your BetMGM account. No opt-in necessary. Then bet up to the specified maximum stake on your bet slip. Activate the token. If you win your bet, you'll score extra winnings, all inside the BetMGM app. Download it today, and please gamble responsibly. All right, our 3 favorite moments of the show, our 3 stars. Let's hit it, Ken.
3.
Hey, New York! I'm sorry it took so long, but here we are, and hopefully it won't take that long again.
Yeah, let's hope not. Jim Dolan, that was from Saturday night after beating the Spurs in San Antonio. Says they're not going to the second apron. They don't have to do a lot to keep the squad together going into next year, but that might be a necessity. A little bit of a wet blanket over the beginning of today's festivities, though. Our number 2 star.
2.
But in terms of who he is, you sort of touched it. He's 6'3", 230. He is fantastic in space with his legs, but he's not a quarterback, sort of like Big Ben did early on in the Steelers' career, looking to run if the first read isn't there. He throws a fantastic deep ball, and he's incredibly efficient throwing the deep ball.
Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports, with the First Pick pod that he hosts alongside Rand Carthon, has already begun breaking down, and he had before all of this happened, Brendan Sorsby for the NFL supplemental draft. You heard his report there. He's got the talent. We'll see if he learns to make the right reads at the NFL level and see how much people are willing to risk on Brendan Sorsby in that supplemental draft. Finally, our number 1 star of the day.
1.
Momentum is everything in a World Cup scenario. We had one of the best starts. This might be a surprise to many, but I really feel like this team is well poised to have another big performance. Now, this is Australia, who we didn't expect to beat Turkey, and it's a different proposition, and it might mean some changes in our lineup, especially with Christian being protected right now. And I got some status on that if you want it, but I expect him to play, but I don't think it's imperative that he plays.
Eric Winaldo, former U.S. men's national team great, also the host of WTF, Winaldo Talks Football on Sirius XM, talking about Christian Pulisic. could be ready to play, but they don't necessarily need him to beat Australia. They play tomorrow afternoon. We will continue to talk about that one and everything else going on in the World Cup tomorrow here on You Better You Bet. Also, baseball, College World Series final has been set. We'll preview that as well. And everything continuing to come out of NFL mini camps as they wrap up around the league. Plenty and whatever leftovers from the Knicks parade coming tomorrow. Bleck and Abdallah next right here on Westwood One Sports.